donkeys. Okay, I'm going to try to get this again. Okay, our next storyteller is a founding member of the WGTD radio players, where she's voiced countless characters and directed countless shows over the years. She's a reenactor of the annual Kenosha Street Walks for the Greenridge Cemetery and active in community theater. But none of that matters compared to her crowning achievement, which was directing Tony Dow, that's right, Wally of the Beaver, in a play last year. So our little group has been touched by greatness. We've rubbed elbows with Tony Dow. So anyways, without further ado, making her fourth or fifth appearance on the OLIO stage, VIkki Dumez.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, I hobnob with the big stars. Standing on the corner, watching all the cars go by. Standing on the corner, watching all the cars go by. I am a crossing guard. I have a stop sign and a whistle, and I am authorized to use them both. I also have assistants, fifth graders. There's one fifth grader that has a very special place in my heart. Her name is Kiera, and Kiera and I would be at the corner, and we would tell tales and tell stories and make up stories. And like Lieutenant Columbo, I always kept in my pocket a little notebook and a pencil, and I took notes. And what I did was, I went home and I put all of our thoughts together into a story, and I'd like to share that story with you tonight. Okay, good. It was an unusual afternoon. It was January in Wisconsin, and it was 50 degrees. Vicki was at the corner. Kiera ran to the corner, swinging her orange lunch tote, smiling as always. The afternoon shift went off without a hitch. After the work was all done and all the patrons had safely and securely crossed the street, Vicki and Kiera then began to chit-chat as usual, chirping like little chickadees. The afternoon school traffic had trickled off and soon disappeared, as usual. It was a cloudless day, and the afternoon sun was bright in the sky. Kiera was facing 75th Street, the busier of the two streets. Vicki faced Kiera. Suddenly, Kiera said, "Did you see that?" "See what?" Vicki responded. "The sand bucket. The top moved." Vicki spun around to see the yellow bucket. It stood silently across the street. It had one word, sand, printed in big, bold black letters across its midsection. "No, it didn't," she replied, using her hand to block the sun from her eyes. "Oh, yes, it did," Kiera said. "I saw it." "Well, I must have missed it while I had my back turned," said Vicki. "Look, there it goes again!" Kiera was getting very excited, and she was bobbing up and down. Now this time, when Vicki turned around, the lid of the sand bucket was slowly bumping up and down, swaying from side to side. It started slowly, but then began to build. The rattle that the lid made grew louder and louder and louder. Vicki and Kiera looked at each other in stunned silence. The noise continued to build, very much like a tea kettle that's on top of the stove coming to a boil. The bucket itself then began to vibrate and shake. Suddenly, the the bucket blew its top. It flipped its lid. The yellow plastic lid was tethered to the yellow plastic barrel by a very sturdy piece of yellow plastic rope. The pop lid made a very loud clanging sound as it hit what Vicki and Kiera thought was the side of the bucket. Just then, the fire hydrant that lived next to the bucket started to hiss and hiss. The pop lid had crashed into the fire hydrant, and then the water began spurting wildly from the hydrant. It gushed everywhere, and a good deal of it ended up inside the sand bucket. The bucket then rocked back and forth and back and forth. It was now completely out of control. Water kept pouring frantically out of the hydrant, and Vicki and Kiera stood motionless, watching this mayhem unfold across the street from them. They were much too frightened to talk, but they instantly knew what it was. The wet sand whirled and twirled and swirled rapidly inside the bucket. It formed what looked like a crooked arm, complete with spindly fingers. A loud whoosh was heard as it reached up out of the bowels of the bucket and grabbed the hydrant, smothering it in wet sand. The sand didn't stop there. Oh no. The arm of the sand snaked across the sidewalk, jumped up onto the branches with the bare bushes. The wet sand then traveled up the bushes with its spiny fingers and crushed the lower branches of the unsuspecting tree that was next to the bushes. It left nothing in its wake. It was taking no prisoners. It was upset. No, my friends, it was not upset. It was more than upset. It was very angry. It was ... the dreaded sand monster. On the corner across the street, Vicki and Kiera were very scared. Of course the two had heard about the sand monster. It was somewhat of a Southport urban legend, but until that very day, neither of them had actually seen the beast until that day. The sand monster heard the girls from across the street. In a fury, it swirled around and faced the pair, its arms and fingers aimed directly at them. It had morphed now, and it had 2 arms with 2 hands and 2 sets of fingers. It was frightening, very frightening. It waved its limbs menacingly at the girls. They stood, they were frozen, and they wanted to let it go. They were dazed and confused by the beast's mesmerizing swirls. So soon they were staring directly at that sand monster. And then, as if they were zombies, they both began to walk woodenly across the street, directly toward the sand monster. Vicki had her stop sign at her side, and her whistle hung loosely around her neck on its lanyard. They said nothing. This was very unusual. The sand monster had maliciously cast its evil spell on them and was crooking its finger at them to call them. But when they got across the street, the sand monster began to hiss and whirl and twirl and swirl all around them. It circled them both, striking at each girl, spinning them each around. Then Kiera spotted the speed limit 25 sign that was a few feet away. She willed herself free. When she broke from the spell, she broke free from the wet, sandy whirlpool and grabbed at that speed limit sign. She began tugging on it. She called to Vicki, "Help me! Help me! Don't get caught up by him! Help me!" Kiera was not frantic at all. She was clear-headed, and she worked diligently at that speed limit sign. Hearing Kiera's familiar voice, Vicki blinked her eyes and shook her head, and Kiera kept calling to her, come on, Vicki, you can do it, I need your help." Kiera's words helped snap Vicki out of her spell. Vicki ran to the speed limit sign and began to push hard on one side as Kiera pulled just as hard on the other side. Push, push, pull, pull, push, pull. What a team they made. From time to time, one or other of the girls would take a hold of the sign and shake it from side to side as hard as she could. The sand monster, meantime, was still swirling and twirling and whirling all around them and striking at them. Vicki took her own stop sign and began to use it as a shovel to move some of the wet dirt around the base of the speed limit sign. The hard work eventually paid off. The speed limit sign soon gave a little, and then even more. And then it broke free. Kiara was working on pure adrenaline at this time. She was not going to let that sand monster beat her or her friend Vicki. She used what seemed like superhuman strength. It was like she was Wonder Woman. And she hoisted the speed limit sign out of the ground and up over her head. Now, Kiara is a petite girl, so this was incredible. She swung the uprooted sign wildly at the swirling sand monster. And the monster was stunned. Whoa, what just happened? It stopped in its tracks for merely a nanosecond. Then it lunged and hissed angrily at Kiara. Kiara was not afraid. She was determined. She whacked the monster from one side. She whacked it from the other. She whacked it again and again and again. And Vicki blew her whistle shrilly. She picked up her stop sign and began swatting at the monster. Now, her stop sign was rather small. It was plastic and did not weigh nearly as much as the speed limit sign. But Vicki swatted valiantly, trying to help Kiara. Kiara did the lion's share of the work. Soon the sand monster began to tire, and then it began to slowly shrink. It twirled itself in the opposite direction, gradually losing fingers, hands, and arms. Now shapeless, it slunk back into the yellow plastic bucket. The bucket oozed a few wet tears. Its wet mass let out a whimper. And it was over. The beast had given up. It had been defeated by the 2 traffic signs wielded by the 2 good friends. Vicki replaced the lid. Kiara brushed her hands together and smiled broadly. Well, that's that, she said. She confidently took Vicki by the hand. They headed to the corner. Vicki found her whistle. She was nervous. It took her a while. She put it in her mouth. She let go of Kiara's hand, and then she took a step off the curb, blew her whistle, walked into the crosswalk, held up her stop sign, outstretched her other arm. She looked over at Kiara and nodded, giving Kiara the signal for her to safely cross the street. And Kiara did just that, smiling all the way. Kiara's mom pulled up to the corner, as usual. Vicki and Kiara said goodbye, as usual. Kiara happily jumped into the big white minivan, as usual. So, Kiara, how was your day? Did anything happen? Her mom asked. Kiara replied, nothing unusual. And the moral of the story is, always obey traffic signs.